This is Diana Sullivan in Austin, Texas. Because stockinette stitch curls so much, we need solutions for the edges. The top and bottom edges roll to the front and the sides roll to the back. And it's a mess. So we're always coming up for edgings. Well, this video is entitled, You Can Put a Hem Just About Anywhere. So here is a sample of stockinette stitch where I began by making a hem. I finished at the top by making a hem. Then I made a hem on this side. Then I made a hem on this side. Then, to close the corner and have a nice looking corner, I squeezed the two pieces of hem together and did a little seam, just a tiny half-inch seam from here to here, and then on the other side from here to here. And this is how that looked, and here's where I did it on the other side. So there are many situations other than square things, tops, bottoms, and straight sides where you might put a hem. For instance, what if you had a slanted pocket? Or what if you had a slanted armhole? Here's a hem along a slant, and it was a good finish for this. This is the same hem that these were. This was just a 6-row deep picot hem. So there's the back, and there's the front. And I did this one with a back stitch bind off, so it's stretchy. I did this one with a latch bind off. It's only a little bit stretchy. Now, another place where you might put a hem, and since the video is about putting a hem almost anywhere, is the neckline. So here is a little make-believe neckline, and I didn't knit the whole sweater front or back. I just knitted the curved part here, and we're going to put a hem along this curve. So the first thing I have to do is figure out how many stitches wide my hem will be. Well, here in the middle on the waist yarn I have 6 stitches, so I have 6 there, and then on each side I can actually just stretch this, and I can decide that that's 12. So 12 and 12 is 24, and 6 more makes 30. This stretches easily from 15 to 15. So we're going to have a 30 stitch wide hem which gets applied to this neckline. You can begin your hem with some waist knitting. So I'm bringing out the needles from 15 left to 15 right. I'm actually on 16. There we go. I'm on every other needle, and I'm going to begin with a little bit of this green. So just a row for a quick cast on every other needle. Then I'm hanging a comb, and then I'm knitting on all the needles, all 30 of them. And I'll do about 6 rows. This is the waist knitting. It's strictly a stitch holder. Instead of using a ravel cord, I'm going to do the loop method. I'm pulling down a piece on the side where the carriage is, knitting across. I'm going to hang a clip on that bit of yarn and let it hang down. Then I'm going to cut this piece of yarn and find a clip and put a clip on this piece of yarn and let it hang down. Now I'm ready for the garment yarn. I'm on the garment tension. This is the same tension that that little mocked up neckline was. I'm threading, and I'm going to do 6 rows at the garment tension. Now for a picot hem, what you do are holes, eyelets, all across the row. I'm doing them on every other needle, but I'm not going to do the end needle, so I'll have 2 at the end. Won't matter. I am simply transferring these stitches to the neighboring needle. You can go to the left or you can go to the right. Now, you might be thinking, why is she putting hems all over the place? Well, if you don't have a ribbing attachment, hems are a good substitute. They're also nice looking and they work well in places where having a double thickness is good. Now, if I was going to have a little fantasy about the ideal hem, and I usually do start my projects by thinking about how would I like this to be that would really be ideal. It would fold over and enclose the edge of the knitting. And that's how this one is going to work. So this is just the inside of the hem. It gets folded over. This was 6 rows. We need 6 more rows for the outside of the hem, just like any knitted hem. And last stitch. However, there's a little twist on this. After I do 5 rows, I'm going to do the last row on the loosest tension I can get from this machine. I'm going all the way in my example from 4 to 10 for that last row. And then I'm going to take this off on waste yarn, or maybe I should say waste knitting. It'll be another piece of green. And I am not wanting my waste knitting to be at that loose tension, so going back down to the garment tension, which was 4, threading up with my green again and putting some rows of scrap knitting on. Strictly acts as a stitch holder. We machine it so quickly that we don't bother with those little safety pin shaped stitch holders or anything. We use knitting most of the time for our stitch holder. Now, I have to mention, you did have a choice here. You could do this with a garter bar. Those blue stitches in this row right here at the top of the hem could have gone on a garter bar. That's another way to do it. Okay, I'll get the hardware off the hem, show it to you briefly, and then we'll start talking about how to apply it to our garment. So. This is the bottom below my hem, and it's scrap yarn, and it's got that silly cast on that doesn't unravel, so it's a good quick cast on, but you wouldn't really want to use it on a garment. And then here's the inside and outside of my hem, ending with that loose row, and then a little more waste yarn. Now let's hang the neckline on this little sweater sample. The first thing I'm going to do is hang these stitches in the center. I want the knit side of this facing me because I'm going to put this on with right sides together like seamstresses do. So often seams go right sides together. Now these stitches in the middle that are on the waste yarn were 6 stitches in count, 3 on each side of 0. Might as well center. You get a better looking neck band if you have the same number of stitches on each side of the center. Otherwise, it'll pull to the side. And at this moment, I can even unravel these, which I usually don't do. I usually leave this on, but I want to unravel it so you can see exactly how that looks. Let's zoom in. So you see, we are looking at 6 live stitches, and if I popped them off, they'd unravel. Now, let's hang the stitches to the right of 0. I want to go 1 stitch from the edge, 1 stitch in, and this one won't stay up because it's only got the green thread between, and that's going to come off. But if this was a real neckline, that would be a shoulder seam. So I guess I'll put it on. The shoulder seam would hold it. And then what I tend to do is go one complete stitch from the edge. If I go one stitch from the edge on these stitches near the shoulder, I get a clean looking straight line along that column of stitches. You will observe that when I did the slant, I have a straight line here along that straight column of stitches. I did the decreases with the triple transfer tool, so they're in a little ways, leaving myself with a straight column of stitches for the number 2 stitch. And when I do a hem along the side of the work, you'll also notice that here again I have followed a straight column of stitches. That gives me the tidiest possible look. Now I'm going to just keep hanging, and I am going to have a good chance to see how everything's going to look. I have to move out because this is where decreases were, but you can see that I'm moving out so that I still have 2 threads over my tool. And then this one right here, I like to put on so that it looks like the next stitch in this group. It's, it's a vertical stitch where these are the side of the seam. And I'm just going to go deeply enough in here so that I'm below all the little decrease mess, and give everybody their spot on a needle. And that looks pretty good to me. Now I know that when this neckband is done, what will show is everything just below the needles. And I don't want any little horizontal threads just below the needles. I think that'll be okay. But as little Miss Picky here, I think I'm going to adjust just a little. I think I want to get below this piece of thread, and then get below this one. I'll look again, and if that doesn't look better to me, then we will try it again. How does that look? Kind of, sort of, okay. Okay, over here on the other side, I want to get the very next one there. I want to get the end one and put it on the end needle. And then I can just go along, putting them on their stitch, one stitch from the edge. Now, the next thing I need to do is pull these needles out and hang the top of the hem right sides together as we discussed. So to get the hem right sides together, I find the top of the hem, which is the row with the loose loops. You see how very loose these loops are? That's the top of my hem. So I'm hanging all of these, one stitch on each needle, but just in the tip ends of the hook. And I'm being careful not to split the yarn or put any of the green in there. I just have a few left to do. There's going to be one loop for each hook, and that's what you would expect for the top of the hem. So right sides together, hang the hem using one stitch for each hook, and just put it in the tip end. Now I've got myself a credit card, and I'm going to close these latches. So these latches have been closed all the way across, And now I'm going to take my needle pusher and work things back and back and back. Now that it's up against the bed, those latches are being held shut by that row of knitting. And I can just pop it all right through. Now I've pulled those loops right through the neckline. So here it is, all pulled through the neckline. Next step. A couple more steps to go, folks. This is the bottom of the hem. Let's zoom in on it. What I want to do is pick up each loop from the bottom of the hem and put it in a hook. Now the bottom of hems always have one less stitch, so I'll start on the number 2 stitch, and then I will hang this on across. And yes, you can speed up hanging hems by using a multiple transfer tool. My latches aren't open. There we go. I'll use my credit card to give myself a little help by opening my latches. Makes it easier to hang loops on those stitches. And since I skipped the first loop, it's good to know that I ended up with just one loop here with one needle left. So that's how it should be. Now if you want, you can hang weights on this. I'm going to do that more than for any other reason, just to make things easier for you to see. Now I'm going to close this hem by knitting across one row at garment tension, and to make it easier for my machine to knit across, I'm going to bring these needles out to hold. When the machine goes across, it brings needles out, it pushes needles back, and it's a little bit less stress on the machine to just push them back than to have to pull and push. Now I knit across, which closes my hem. Now I'm going to do a needle bind off to finish this piece. Now I need to bind this off, so I've got myself a tapestry needle, and I'm cutting my yarn and leaving myself a piece to sew with. Now one of my little tricks for doing this sort of thing is to put the weights on to hold the knitting down, and then take the needle pusher and bring the needles out with the knitting in the hooks. Let the knitting come with it, in other words. So you see how that is? And in fact, I'm even going to bring the weights out over here, because I want the knitting to stay on the tips of the hooks. Now, over here, I've got this piece of yarn for sewing. I am threading my needle with it, and I'm going to do a back stitch bind off because it's a stretchier bind off. So I'm going to go from the second stitch inward and then come toward me out of the first stitch, then go in the third stitch, come toward me out of the second stitch. We call it a back stitch because we keep backing up. So I'm moving to the left, going in the fourth, coming out the third, backing up to the fifth, coming out the fourth, backing up 6 and 5, backing up 7, 6. I'll get this sewn, come back on camera, and show you how it looks. I am just finishing up this sewing. Now, when you do a backstitch bind off on your project, think about having enough yarn, because it's a nuisance to have another piece of yarn and hide ends in the middle of the sewing job. Anyway, I figure 3 times the width of the knitting always gives me enough yarn. And there I am, finished with the little sewing job. Now I am going to take this off the machine. I just take the weights off, I just lift it right off the machine. Let's push these needles back. Let's see how to get all this waste yarn off. First of all, this waste yarn has a loop on this end. No, it doesn't. This waste yarn is unraveling for me, so that's good. Okay, so one piece of waste yarn will unravel, the other one will be harder to get out. Okay, that waste yarn's gone. Now I have this other piece of waste yarn. This piece has this loop. Find the loop that goes farther down, closer to the knitting, and pull on that end. And pull, pull, pull. This is where we cast on, and so this piece on the inside is always a little trickier to get the waste yarn out of. I still have waste yarn on my shoulders. We're going to leave that. Here is the inside of our neck, and that was my little bind off that I did. This is stretchy. This will go over a head. Here's the outside of the neck. Here's what you'll see when somebody wears the neck. So you can see this gives you a very nice neckline, even though you don't have a ribber. It's one of many edgings you could use, but I just want you to realize that you can put a hem almost anywhere, even around a neck.